For all the stories we do hear on black mob violence and how it's so wildly out of proportion and how so many reporters are in denial, deceit, and delusion about it, that's only the tip of the iceberg. During the 8 years of the Obama administration, it's really hard to convince people, to get people to grok how deep this whole, their worldview was, their entire worldview was where they looked at everything through the lens of race, everything. And I was telling somebody that this morning, when I hang around with people you might call civilians, and they gently bring up my topic, and I don't want to be one of these people that when I start talking about this, I don't shut up for 45 minutes in a social situation. But what I said was, listen, it's a lot deeper than just crime and violence and denial, deceit, and delusion. And I was thinking of this story from Paul Sperry in last year's in the New York Post, which I did a big story, which I covered in Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Sperry wrote a great book on the housing crisis, how that all came tumbling down, and what happened here, which I saw firsthand, by the way, and what Sperry described in the housing crisis also happened in the car loan business, and how the people in the Obama administration, they started going after people who make car loans because they did this huge spreadsheet, and they saw that Hispanic and black people were paying slightly higher rates. Let's listen to what happened to that bank, and let's take a look at some of the inside documents. This guy Paul Sperry, one of my favorite writers now, let's look at the story he tells about this crazy level of racial hostility, black and white, and how they use the federal government to enforce this racial preferences on a very big and expensive scale. So here's the headline: Bank CEO reveals how Obama administration shook him down. This is the most powerful opening paragraph I've read in a story in a very long time. Quote, the former CEO of Ally Financial, Inc. says the Obama administration abused its power by holding the bank's business hostage in order to coerce a record settlement of, quote, trumped-up racism charges and push profit-killing new regulations on the entire auto lending industry. The huge $100 million deal has spooked several other major lenders into resolving similar race-biased charges and offering below-market rates to minorities for car loans. That's how we got into the housing crisis, people. They were giving out lots and lots of home loans because of Barney Frank. They were giving out home loans to people who had no business getting a home loan, but Barney Frank forced the banks to do it because they said the banks were not lending money to black people and Hispanic people because banks were nothing but a bunch of white racists. And when all of a sudden the loans came due and the loans started defaulting in crazy levels, that was the first domino that tipped over the whole thing. Let's get back to the article. Michael A. Carpenter, who is at the head of the Detroit-based Ally from 2009 to 2015, said in an interview that Obama's powerful consumer watchdog agency threatened to derail the bank's efforts to obtain key regulatory approvals if it didn't agree to settle the allegations out of court. That's what we call blackmail. Quote, to be strong-armed by a regulator was inappropriate to say the least. He said they absolutely knew they had tremendous leverage over us. He goes on to talk about how he says there's no merit to these accusations. They are a means to a political end, forcing car dealers to abandon discretionary pricing and equalizing credit outcomes regardless of borrower credit worthiness. He said doing that, if they did that more and more and more, that would be signing the death warrant for the entire industry. Lots of people agree. This guy Sperry said the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, a creation of Obama, that was kind of like the NAACP with subpoena power. Blah, blah, blah. We fought these trumped up accusations in every court, and we would have fought these trumped up accusations if paying back the American taxpayer had not been the compelling priority. Quote, they were using us as a way to regulate the industry, and unquote, and it may be working. Several of the other nation's biggest lenders, including Toyota, Fifth Third Bank, and American Honda Finance, have agreed to change the way they figure interest rates, and a handful of other banks have agreed to adopt flat fees. Here's where it gets, here's the money graph. A confidential Consumer Finance Protection Bureau memo detailing how the agency would go after Ally strongly confirms the strategy. The October 2013 document says being able to roll the financial giant would, quote, send an important message, unquote, to the entire auto finance industry to eliminate discretionary pricing or face similar charges of racial discrimination. There's no intellectual honesty in their approach, said the former head of Ally. It's interesting to note that this was not one black or Hispanic person came forward and said, yeah, I got a higher loan because I'm black. This was something manufactured out of whole cloth by these bureaucrats who had nothing better to do. The fundamental premise on which they based their case was not true, and they knew it, but they didn't care. You could show them all the data on the planet, they did not care. They had an agenda, said Carpenter. Worse, the CFPB could never identify the alleged 235,000 minority victims harmed by the loan markups. So the agency had to resort to guessing race by last name and zip code, a so-called proxy method that's wildly inaccurate and often misidentifies white people as black. Carpenter said 20% of the checks that the government is now mailing out to people are probably going to Caucasians. Quote, we didn't want the same problem again, as Carpenter said, so we said to ourselves, what are we going to do to make sure we pass the fair lending test, unquote. And in fact, the industry is now having to pay protection money to the government as a cost of doing business. Quote, if that's the way you get their metrics right, he said, that's the way you have to play the game. So Ally decided, it's better to join them than fight them. So all of a sudden, in the last year or so, we've been seeing all these Ally commercials pop up featuring all the warm and fuzzy things Ally is doing for black people. Maybe you've seen them. Maybe they were kind of jarring to you. They seemed a little bit out of place in a car loan business. Now you know why. Why don't we take a look at a couple of these commercials?
I grew up in the projects, and so home ownership was not an option for us. I am taking the steps to own a home because I want my children to know it's all so that they can have a better life. Oh my gosh. This is amazing. We're so much closer to home ownership.
Years ago, me and my wife was actually saving for a house. But one day we were sitting there and we decided that, you know what, something needed to be done about what was going on in our inner city. Instead of buying a house, we decided to form this youth league.
What is he doing wrong?
He should shut the block.
Exactly. Why is it
It's volunteer. We don't get a paycheck. It's 100% from the heart. Football shaped my life, and I'm praying that it shaped these kids' lives as well.
My mom brought us to the United States from Nigeria because she wanted to give us a different type of opportunity to go further with our education. In doing that, she sacrificed a lot. The main reason I wanted to get my PhD was to continue my mother's purpose in bringing us to this country and to build a foundation here for my family.
I've met a lot of conservatives who think that people who are business leaders walk straight out of the novel Atlas Shrugged. They're going to fight for private property. They're going to fight for their rights to run their business. They're going to fight for their right to do what they can to make a buck or two. No, that's not really the way most CEOs are. For every guy running Chick-fil-A's or that, what's it called, Hobby Lobby shop, there are hundreds and hundreds of guys who just, they're very, very pragmatic. And if somebody walks in and says, listen, our competitor just got hit by this huge suit, they're coming for us, we don't want any part of that, let's change. It's better to switch than fight. Let's change because we don't want the federal government coming in here and ruining our business by accusing us of being a bunch of white racist pigs who won't give free stuff to black people. Yes, that's the way the world was working under Obama. I know, that's astonishing to me too. It's astonishing that it happened. It's astonishing it didn't get more attention. It's astonishing, I guess it's not astonishing, that more reporters didn't talk about this, write about this, become a topic on Fox News, because most people in that business just don't want to make the black kids angry.